After 3 rounds, these playoffs continue to surprise us. Could anyone have predicted that the only sweep of the playoffs would be in the conference finals? Or that Michael Leighton, of all people, would steal Halak's impenetrability? Oh yeah, that's a word. And now we move on to the matchup that could be the most interesting of all. The Chicago Blackhawks versus the Philadelphia Flyers in a battle for league supremacy. Welcome to the penalty box. In what to me was the biggest surprise of the playoffs, aside from the Capitals being eliminated in the first round, the Montreal Canadiens lose to the Philadelphia Flyers in 5 games. So, what went wrong here for the Canadiens? Well, the Flyers found Halak's weakness. Danny Briere sat down and watched loads of game tape and found out that Halak was weakest high glove side. And what I have to say to this is, how the hell was that not discovered in the previous 2 rounds against offensive powerhouses Washington and Pittsburgh? Anyway, the Flyers used that to light Halak up. Nearly all of their goals in the first 2 games were high glove side. Combine that with parking your big bodies in front of Halak's eyes, and Philadelphia has a surplus of those, and the Habs couldn't mount an effective comeback. But what I couldn't understand was why the Habs weren't doing the same thing to Michael Leighton. I mean, I know that you have smaller players, but you gotta get a few guys out there who are almost as tall as Leighton. Not blocking Halak was what killed the Caps, so what's the deal? Speaking of which, who else thought it was hilarious when Brian Gionta tried to stand in front of Michael Leighton? Gionta's 5'5", Leighton is 6'3". He didn't even have to make an effort to look over Gionta. Gionta might as well not have even been there. But aside from that, the Flyers also used their size and physicality to just overpower the Habs. I mean, when you have Chris Pronger out there running amok and knocking people down, you can't do much with a team, most of whom are shorter than 6 feet tall. But what I was surprised at was how ineffective Carcillo was in an agitator role. I mean, sure, he was out there doing his thing, but the award for the biggest douchebag on the ice without a doubt has to go to Maxime Lapierre. In fact, I have to say that the biggest positive out of the Habs being eliminated is that I won't be watching the game wanting to punch Lapierre in the face. The San Jose Sharks are swept from the playoffs as the Chicago Blackhawks keep on rolling to the Stanley Cup Final. And what did I say last video? What did I say? Never underestimate the power of a layoff. It can do crazy things to a team. The layoff sucked the power from the Sharks. Strap on your stat hats. The Sharks scored 7 goals in 4 games. 5 of them came from just one guy, Patrick Marleau. Joe Thornton was held scoreless, in fact only managed 1 assist and was a -5. He was also on ice for 7 of Chicago's 10 even-strength goals in the series. Danny Heatley continued to be a non-factor. And the Pavelski line that carried the Sharks through the first 2 series of the playoffs collapsed, managing no goals on 37 shots. Now, I realize not all of that can be attributed to the layoff. Major props to Dave Bolland for shutting down Joe Thornton. And to Niemi for putting up a very solid effort. And to Seabrook and Keith for continuing to shut down the opposition, which I also predicted. And I gotta ask, what happens now in San Jose? Are there changes coming? Because yeah, they got to the conference finals, but they also got swept. And even though they were the best regular season team in the West, they also fell short of winning the ultimate goal, the Stanley Cup. So eventually, do you have to just call it quits and do a total overhaul? And on that ominous note... Alright, here we go. This one's for all the marbles. 82 games, 3 rounds of playoffs, all of it culminate in this one matchup for the ultimate trophy. The Chicago Blackhawks versus the Philadelphia Flyers in the Stanley Cup Final. And for this one, let's just look at keys to winning the series for each team. Starting with Philadelphia. Key number 1, take command physically. Take your big guys and just turn them loose on Chicago. Play the typical Broad Street bully style. It's this that helped you beat Montreal, and if you can push Chicago around on the ice, it'll translate onto the scoreboard. Key number 2, goaltending, goaltending, goaltending. Michael Leighton needs to keep up the play that saw him shut out the Canadiens. And the Canadiens had one big scorer, Mike Camilleri. Well, Chicago has quite a few more. You need to be at the top of your game to keep them off the scoreboard. Keep Leighton's vision clear, let him see all the shots, and he's proven that he can stop them. And on the other side of that coin, key number 3, crowd the crease. Antti Niemi is a young and relatively inexperienced goalie. He's been playing very well throughout the postseason, which is great. But Chicago also has a very good defense, which has made his job easier. If you get big bodies in front of him, block his sight, good things could happen. Moving on, let's see what can help win this series for Chicago. Key number 1, don't back down. When Philly amps up their physical play, and rest assured they will, you need to respond in kind. You need your big guys like Dave Bolland, and the biggest guy of all, Dustin Byfuglien, ready to fight for every inch of ice. Because if you let Philly set the tone of the game, things can begin to unravel, just like they did for Montreal. But if you hit back and take away that edge, you've taken away a major weapon in the Philadelphia arsenal. And on a related note, key 2, make life miserable for Chris Pronger. Philadelphia currently has the biggest, meanest defenseman in the playoffs, and they use him to his full potential. This guy plays almost 30 minutes a game, and he ain't Montreal alive. If you can push him around for a change, you've made him completely ineffective. A total non-factor. Key number 3, defense wins games. And nowhere is this more true than with Chicago. Brent Seabrook and Duncan Keith have been absolutely stellar on the back end in these playoffs. They silenced the Canucks' best players. They silenced the Sharks' best players. They will need to silence Philadelphia's best players. Take Mike Richards, Jeff Carter, and Simon Gagne out of the equation. And lastly, like Philadelphia, Chicago needs to crowd the crease. As we saw in the series versus Montreal, if you let Leighton see it, he'll stop it. Taking shots wide out on him does not work. So, take away his sight. Get your big guys in front of him, then get your artillery going. Because stopping Johnny Toews without a guy in your face is hard enough. Stopping him with someone in your face? Damn near impossible. So, who's gonna win this series? Well, my initial gut reaction is Chicago. On Chicago, you've got Johnny Toews, Patty Kane, Patrick Sharp, and Christopher Stieg. But when you think about it, Philly has some big guns on their side as well, with Mike Richards, Jeff Carter, Simon Gagne, and Danny Briere. But in the end, what the playoffs are about is elevating your game to unheard of levels. And Johnny Toews has certainly done that, being the playoffs' leading scorer. And Chicago, who many said was too inexperienced to win this cup this year, is looking nearly invincible. The entire team is elevating their play at the right moment. So I'm going to go with my original choice to make the finals and pick the Blackhawks to win it all in 6 games and win their first Stanley Cup since 1961. So there you go, guys. Get strapped in and get ready to enjoy some sweet hockey. I'll see you on the other side.